Have you ever wondered what really went on behind the walls of medieval monasteries? The popular version talks about monks and nuns who avoid any desire, bound to a life of renunciation. But once the door closes and daily life takes over, the story gains more layers. Look at those stone buildings. On the outside, everything seems like order, prayer, discipline. Inside, though, lived people with weaknesses, affections, and curiosities. There were rules, of course, and the day was filled with chants, reading the scriptures, and repetitive tasks like tending gardens or copying manuscripts. The repetition wore them down, and in that weariness hints would appear of what didn't fit into the sermons. Before we go on, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. In the margins of parchments, many would leave little drawings. A dragon curling around a letter, a friar with an oversized nose, animals mocking the ceremonies. They looked like decorations. In practice, they became an outlet, silent comments about everyday life, graphic confessions only those who shared the cloister would understand. These sketches speak of tamed desires, of tensions between the rules and human impulses, of unspoken pacts to keep up appearances. They don't erase devotion. They just show that it coexisted with gray areas. If we follow these marks, the cloister opens like a parallel book, written in the shadow of the altar, meant to be read by attentive eyes page after page. Before emojis showed up on screens, there were already discrete signs in manuscripts, little faces and small figures that, in the margins, commented on what the text itself didn't say. These doodles revealed what ran outside the rules. In monasteries, people of different ages and backgrounds shared routine, work, and silence. From living together came trust. From boredom, unlikely escapes. The ideal of discipline had its cracks. There were prohibitions. Even so, secret encounters turned into whispered stories in the hallways. Secrets so well known they almost stopped being secrets. Superiors tried to keep excesses in check, but they couldn't see everything. At night, when the bells went silent and the doors closed, others opened. Those looking for conversation, affection, or pleasure could find the time and the company. The day called for prayer, the night for socializing. At the table, the rule was similar. By day, measured portions, bread, fruit, vegetables, a bit of protein. Fasting had prestige and was observed. Once night fell, small circles would gather for more generous meals with wine or beer. On feast days, fish and seafood appeared, breaking the oft-repeated image of austerity. Even where meat was forbidden, exceptions were made for the sick or special cases, and the menu expanded. With less physical effort than people might think, and extra calories in the late hours, there was no shortage of those who put on weight. The shared clock followed a different rhythm, long blocks of prayer and reading, household tasks, and then the pause that suspended everything. It's in that pause that daily life revealed itself. Between the ideal and the possible, between the rules and the practice, bonds, gestures, and small codes emerged. From those marginal drawings to the signs we exchange today. Talking about beer in monasteries touches a sensitive spot, the line between discipline and distraction. Over the centuries, monks mastered recipes, fine-tuned fermentation times, and turned the drink into a respected craft. In common rooms, cups went back and forth, and conversations grew livelier. When moderation was lost, moments were born that sparked laughter or fueled uncomfortable rumors. For those who saw the cloister as a place of flawless renunciation, this back and forth was hard to accept. In the world of nuns, the conflict was no smaller. Routine demanded self-control, but daily life brought small pressures, friction, and needs. In some convents, windows with candles burning through the night served as a prearranged signal for visitors determined to cross boundaries. From there came discreet encounters that put to the test vows that, on paper, seemed unbreakable. The stone walls held back quiet laughter and whispered conversations, far from superiors, far from records. Where vigilance eased, there were those who received men of various ages, following a path parallel to the institutions. By day, the cloister appeared focused on reading, prayer, and work. At night, certain areas changed purpose, and the same hallway carried footsteps that weren't on the schedule. These stories passed among curious believers from ear to ear, always in a low tone, without formal complaints. Another chapter unfolded in the so-called Magdalene houses, created to take in women considered deviant. There, theory and practice also clashed, a detail we'll keep exploring. In theory, they were places of purification and repentance. In practice, many convents and monasteries became shelters for people with venereal diseases, or for those who wanted to escape prying eyes. Instead of facing the root of the problem, the discomfort was pushed behind the walls. And it wasn't just the monks. Nuns also crossed boundaries, looking for ways to act on impulses the church called sin. The supervisors tightened rules and locks. Even so, there were cracks where notes slipped through. Quick meetings happened, and whispered promises were exchanged. On the surface, the vows stayed intact. Outside the ritual, life moved to a different rhythm. For those who imagine an untouchable Middle Ages, the shock is certain. These were people with desires that didn't dissolve at the sound of the bell. During holidays on the calendar, Christmas at the top, vigilance loosened and rumors spread. Reports of footsteps at night, wrinkled habits, and encounters that would never make it into the records. Paper preserved the image. Daily life revealed the cracks. Between libraries and kitchens, bonds formed that tested the limits of what was allowed. Nothing epic, just simple tactics to get around strict rules and keep going. Stifled laughter, doors closing quickly, glances that recognized each other in the middle of the liturgy. It's in this contrast, between the proclaimed ideal and the life lived far from the altar, that the Middle Ages step out of the stained glass and start to look human again. And behind every manuscript, there was a backstage waiting to whisper the next chapter. If those spaces were presented as havens of devotion, life there didn't fit into neatly framed scenes. Over time, human nature always found ways to assert itself, even when the rules said otherwise. If something in these stories sounds unlikely, it's worth remembering. Much of what happened in monasteries never made it into official records. The stone, built to preserve purity, also learned to keep secrets. As the centuries passed, those secrets fermented into rumors. Traces still linger in the margins of illuminated manuscripts, in books describing the daily life of the cloisters, and in memories passed down from generation to generation. Before assuming absolute control, it's worth recognizing that the Middle Ages were just as complex as any other period. In every era, desires and weaknesses persist. They don't disappear just because someone forbids them. There was discipline, yes, but it coexisted with the urge to experience what the rules tried to keep out of reach. That's why what happened behind the stone walls didn't always vanish into silence. There are accounts that during Christmas time, some monasteries became the stage for unusual practices, tolerated for a moment and challenged soon after. In an Italian city between the 10th and 11th centuries, carved tunnels connected the religious compound to noble palaces, creating discrete passages between worlds that pretended not to touch. These corridors were more than shortcuts. They show how faith and desire walked side by side, even where the rule seemed absolute. In the less guarded corridors of convents, there were passages that offered an exit to those who could no longer bear the cloister, and also an entrance for discreet visitors. While the choir filled the chapel, low voices gathered in distant rooms. Bread was shared, wine was poured, and protocol gave way to gestures the rules condemned. If brought to light, such encounters would cause a stir for involving prominent names. Even so, they were part of a hidden daily life, shaped by outside decisions. Many young women took the habit to protect the family name or escape unwanted alliances. In this setting, dimly lit parties, secret hallways, and hurried notes reveal a monastery far more porous than the image of absolute retreat would suggest. Ecclesiastical discipline was strict, but certain dates opened small cracks. Christmas especially became an excuse to loosen rules, exchange knowledge, and welcome traveling scholars. In some places, networks of cooperation emerged. There's a record of a 15th century French abbey that kept a library with manuscripts on astrology, alchemy, and natural sciences, studied by candlelight. And it's in this space of shadow and curiosity that the story changes tone. Who decided what could be read? How far did obedience go when knowledge was calling? Anyone passing through the church on Christmas night would see only the liturgy. Outside the altar, though, in cold corridors and empty cloisters, some nuns gathered in low voices to read forbidden texts and discuss ideas that didn't fit into the sermons. Between stifled laughs, they exchanged small gifts, sprigs of herbs, recipe notebooks, that reached beyond the grasp of ecclesiastical power. The same spirit of resistance showed up in the bonds that held the community together. Near the walls, discreet gardens sprouted, especially at this time of year, ensuring food and a quiet form of defiance. These gatherings opened a small window to experience a kind of autonomy rare in daily life. In the pauses between prayers, silence became fertile ground, and there grew a strength that encouraged careful acts of transgression. There are accounts of year-end occasions when nuns adopted false names and mingled with townsfolk at fairs and processions. Others planned escapes through hidden passages, guided by coded messages. In one convent, a group arranged meetings with knights on Christmas Eve, drawing the attention of the authorities. The secret failed. Records survive and reveal a rarely remembered side of monastic life. Between ritual and rule, there was also strategy, risk, and the desire to choose one's own path. Not every encounter was about romance. Many times, the nuns served the nearby villages. In the harshness of winter, when illnesses spread and accidents were common, they drew on their knowledge of medicinal plants, preparing teas, poultices, and ointments that eased pain and helped recovery. For many people, this care felt like a miracle. For some sectors of the church, however, it raised suspicion for bypassing official control and fueled accusations of witchcraft. There's also a lesser-discussed chapter: discrete rituals that blended Christian symbols with ancient customs, especially around Christmas. In certain regions of Spain, accounts tell of candle-lit vigils with songs passed down from distant times, and symbolic elements that didn't align with religious norms. Although seen as Christmas celebrations, many of these gestures came from traditions that predated Christianity and had no official recognition. There wasn't always open conflict. In some places, abbesses held authority close to that of local leaders. They managed lands, mediated disputes, and negotiated with secular authorities, securing resources and protection. This weaving together of care, tension, and power helps explain how convents held such a central place in community life, and why so many stories emerged from these borderlands. Before we wrap up, it's worth remembering an episode from the 12th century, an abbey that broke with the bishop and began sheltering women fleeing forced marriages. It wasn't an isolated gesture. In many convents, the end of the year wasn't just about songs and prayers. There was study, the pursuit of autonomy and care for the community, medicine, shelter, listening. While official records insist on obedience and enclosure, small signs tell another story. Within stone walls, discreet routes opened, leadership emerged, choices appeared. That's the trail that reaches us today. As we close, the question remains: what paths are we still not seeing? And the invitation, to look again at the past, to recognize in it the seeds of change that keep on growing. Because history, when seen up close, isn't static. It beats in every gesture that strays from what's expected and makes room for the next step.